Greetings and welcome to this latest episode of the Pandemic Podcast. Tonight, we're very excited to be joined by a special guest to talk about how the healthcare workers are fighting for choice, specifically around bodily autonomy. We'll be introducing the NHS 100K campaign. This is really, from my perspective, off the back of what we've seen in the care sector, where up to between 50 to 70,000 care home workers have been affected by recent government mandates. Both real empirical data and anecdotal stories have shown us what pressures over this winter period the care sector is now under. And now the NHS is next up in terms of its threat of these particular mandates. And we'll note tonight, I'm sure, the hypocrisy of the mandates, given that the government has decided to postpone it till spring. So to give people during the time of need, the NHS will have the support it requires, and then to say thank you, give the staff the boot in spring. I'm sure we'll touch on that tonight. But delighted to be joined by Lilith tonight, who's a paramedic and now an activist supporting the NHS 100K campaign. Lilith, it's absolutely fantastic to have you on the Pandemic Podcast. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. No, thank you very much for having us, because we do watch the Pandemic Podcast, and for me personally, it's gotten me through this whole topsy-turvy world. So thank you for having me on.
Oh, that's very kind of you to say, and welcome to the show. So to get us started, what inspired you to be part of this campaign? It's a hugely important issue. What inspired you to get started with this type of work?
Yeah, so in terms of NHS 100K, we were watching the care sector go through their mandates, and we were just keeping a close eye on it, seeing how it would turn out, just watching other countries fall to vaccine mandates, with the US doing their insane vaccine mandates across the whole country. We had France, Italy, Greece. They were all falling under vaccine mandates. So we were keeping a close eye on the care sector and to see how they would pan out. And unfortunately, it came down upon them, and they've lost. I think it's about 60,000 care home staff or care staff, and that's a devastating blow. Seeing how understaffed the care sector is and how much hard work they put in through the pandemic. So it was disappointing to see that occur, and we just kind of had a sense that we would be next. There were rumors about it. So myself and some ambulance staff colleagues, we already had a group formed, and we thought, let's start building up on this. So we created NHS 100K with the aims to kind of gather the reported 100,000 NHS staff that will lose their jobs because of vaccine mandates. So we started up with the website, Telegram groups, and we're just trying to find each other, because we are a minority and it is quite lonely, but this is such an important issue that we thought we'd just reach out and try to get everyone to stand strong together against these mandates.
That's incredible. I mean, my first touch point with the campaign was I saw some of the hashtag This Hill, I think it is, with the images of the NHS workers with their placards and banners making their statement about the situation they found themselves in. And we may have the opportunity to actually pull up some of that on the screen as we go through this, because I know you've assembled a lot of those images on your website.
Yeah, so one of the NHS staff members, Ads, he goes by the name of Ads, he created the This Hill campaign. And we were in talks with him, and we just said, let's run with it, because it is an eye-opener to see how many of us will stand and say, no, this is it. If you bring in mandates, we are willing to lose our jobs. And just seeing the variety of roles that are involved. There are doctors with over 10 years experience. There are radiographers, nurses, paramedics, mental health. There's everyone being involved in this. And I think it really highlights this issue, that this is the end point for us. Like, this is the hill that we are willing to say, no more of this. Yeah, so I think it's just a really good campaign that Ads has created, and we're hoping to get that out into the public space like the care workers did, just to highlight that the NHS are going to lose a lot of job roles and a lot of experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, you can see on the screen now, hopefully, some of these images. You see, people for 17 years, 22 years in service, 27 years in service, 11 years. These are experienced people in very uh, experienced roles. Many important roles. Who we're seeing: nurses, doctors, surgeons. It's unbelievable to see the kind of breadth of those affected by this, and incredible seeing so many people participating in this campaign. Now, why do you? Obviously, this subject of the right of choice has become politicized in recent months. How do you see this right of choice? Because obviously you probably can see it from two perspectives in terms of patients and also staff, because the patient, in my view, should always have a choice around what medical care they undertake, but also in a profession, surely those rights should be extended. What's your view on this issue of the right to choose?
Um, well, I think the core issue is the right to choose, and I think the government has been bulldozing it with, it's in the name of public health, it's in the name of personal safety, and for us, we see both sides of it. We can see how COVID affected people, and we do want to protect them, but we also want to have the right to choose because of whatever beliefs or personal reasons for choosing to take the vaccine or not choosing to take the vaccine. It's a right that we all have, and to have that removed, especially when we've been working in this pandemic with minimal PPE, with
Mm,
no vaccinations, and we've managed. Some of us have had COVID. There is natural immunity. There are scientific papers showing that natural immunity is, perhaps the best immunity that's out there at the moment. And just to have that be, forgotten about or pushed aside or just completely ignored, um, it's just a bit disappointing because you will be losing so many people.
mm,
Um, but we have groups of us who are vaccinated, who've had one booster, and we're not interested in having more. It's an individual choice. And
yes.
yeah, and particularly like with our patients, we've always asked for the consent. We've always given them informed choice. We let them make the choice. Um, and that's what we want to continue to do for the patients. What we don't want to see is, no more consent. We don't want to just go up to them and say, just take this. It's better for you. It's good in the interest of public health that you do this and you do that. Like it just feels like there's a removal of the individual rights happening, and we just don't want to stand for it.
Absolutely, I mean, really, really important point. I mean, the issue of the Nuremberg Code is often raised, and I took the liberty of reading certain segments and paragraphs on that. I'm just going to quote one of those paragraphs now, which is from Rule Number 1 within the Nuremberg Code, which is the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. This means that the person involved should have legal capacity to exercise free power of choice without any intervention, element of force, fraud, deceit, duress, overreaching, or other ulterior form of constraint or coercion. And many people have kind of distanced, this particular law, this particular ruling, to say it's not applicable. But to me, it's directly applicable. You couldn't be more applicable. And the government approach could absolutely be described as overreaching. And we've seen the kind of carrot and stick approach. Threats now of people losing their livelihood. Um, the idea that it's not forced, but you have a choice to lose your livelihood or take the vaccine is just that is a form of coercion,
Yeah.
in my view.
It definitely is. Like with one of the, I think one of the values of the NHS is to respect the individual choice, which
Mm,
I think is quite interesting because that's one of the core values that they built the NHS on. But then they're removing that for their employees under the guise of public health. I think if there was a guarantee that these vaccines would reduce cases and reduce hospitalizations, then perhaps we would be happy to take these vaccines. But there's, it's not 100%. We've seen cases of people who've had their vaccines and still been hospitalized. I think there's scientific papers showing that there's no difference between viral load of vaccinated and unvaccinated people. So we're both carrying the same viral load. The only difference at the moment that the vaccines are showing is that it's reducing your symptom severity.
mm,
So then it becomes your individual choice of whether you want to be very, very sick for a long time or whether you want a quick a quick cold and flu sniffle kind of thing. Um, I just don't enjoy being threatened with my work, or my employment. I don't like the idea that I'm going to be jobless, just because I choose my natural immunity, and I just choose to be weary of this vaccine. Like, it's poison
Absolutely.
in the end.
Well,
Yeah,
you've made some really important points on the efficacy side. Of course, there's safety considerations, which we can come to talk about in a minute. But the on the efficacy side, this idea, even if it is proven, even I know there's lots of question marks on all the data at the moment. There's lots of scrutiny, but let's take an assumption. Let's say if even symptoms were reduced or severity was reduced, um, this blanket approach doesn't make any distinction for age or background illnesses. So if someone's 21 years old, or in their mid 30s or late 40s, or anyone that's under 60 without any kind of pre-existing health conditions, according to the data, is at least is at lower risk of being hospitalized in mortality. But those risk factors are completely ignored with this type of approach,
yeah,
because the argument came out in the first hand that you're doing it to protect others, to stop transmission. Well, that argument is being quite clearly refuted
yeah,
now by the evidence. If there is any evidence, it's very marginal. Um, Whereas this argument that you're doing it to protect others through protecting your own health from putting a burden on the NHS. I mean, case in point, this morning, I was in the gym this morning. I was the only person in the gym. And in the context of this, I was thinking about this conversation. I'm thinking, where are all these other people protecting me by getting themselves fit and healthy? Because
yeah.
ultimately, personal responsibility is a factor in one's immune system. And this idea that we're taking the vaccine in order to lower our risks of being hospitalized, well, so would lowering the risks of obesity. So would lowering the risks of heart disease through um, smoking or alcohol abuse. All of these different personal choices.
Mhm.
Um, but to me, it also, I mean, we won't go to the distance of where these things could go. But if you're going to make that argument about vaccinations and it's about reducing hospitalizations, then you have to make the same argument about other life choices as well, from diet to exercise to stress management. But it would be completely inappropriate for government to intervene in people's private choices in those regards. But here we are, seeing that private right of choice literally
Taken away.
eroding under our feet.
Yeah, like with COVID and what we've seen, I've seen more people be affected with comorbidities. Like you said, there's a high incidence of obesity, there's high blood pressure, there's cardiac history, there's diabetes. Like, these things are preventable diseases, but they are very prominent in Western society.
Yes.
Perhaps that's why we've been seeing bigger cases of COVID, because we've allowed obesity to happen. We've allowed, work to stress us out, causing cardiac problems. We have high sugar diets, and that's causing diabetes. There's a lot that we could do to minimize the risk of COVID. But the vaccines are not the only way to do it.
Mm,
And it's not even a quick fix. Like, I mean, if you're going to say that it is, 95% protective of yourself, then you should be comfortable with it protecting you.
yes.
There's,
Yes.
there's not really a need for every single person to get it. Um, Especially when your transmission is still occurring in the same way. If anything,
Yes.
it's occurring worse in vaccinated people, because they
Y-
don't have the severe symptoms as unvaccinated, and they go out about their day as if it's a cold and flu, like a bit of a sniffle, a bit of a sore throat, a bit of a headache, but they're still able to pass it on, um, as much as an unvaccinated person. So
Yes.
it's
Yes.
it's the same kind of risk, really.
Yes. I mean, this has been one of the cited as one of the potential reasons why we saw an uplift in cases over the summer, which is, if you look at that peculiar, it's a peculiar pattern compared to the previous year and the seasonal aspects. But there's this point around, if you're vaccinated, your behaviours may alter on the basis that you don't perceive the symptoms as aggressively, or you consider yourself to be immune, therefore less likely to transmit the virus. But I think the reverse has been true. Yet this is the point that the care workers and potentially the healthcare workers in the NHS are being discriminated upon, which is it's just, there's no evidence for it. It just feels like an ideological, like you said, it's a war on our individual choices, really.
Yeah, I think it's oh, it's kind of a deep-rooted problem with healthcare workers where we're not allowed to be sick. And it's probably because the NHS has been so strained with understaffing that
Mm,
they need us on the front lines to deal with the healthcare issues that are coming through. But just to take off time off work to be sick has been it's been a difficult process for myself, like
mm,
because I get seasonal colds, and so what I used to do was I used to call in sick to just recover and not infect people, but you get
mm.
punished for being sick, and I don't know how it is, with other services, but definitely for the ambulance service, there is a little bit of a punishment aspect for being responsible for yourself and others. Um,
Wow, wow.
so
That's
yeah, so it's just been an interesting journey and a contradictory journey through COVID and the
yes.
after effects.
Well, I want to comment on one part here because I know that throughout the pandemic, the those of us who have been skeptical of some of the data around cases and hospitalizations when it comes to specifics of the distinction between who is being admitted to hospital with symptoms of COVID versus simply a positive test, and therefore seeing kind of skewed data on that regard. And I think what that's unfortunately led to in some cases is unfair criticism of NHS staff. And I always try and empathize with other people's points of view because, I mean, if you imagine, yeah, and you could shed some light on this, if you work in a hospital, particularly if you work in an ICU, you do long hours, you're stretched, understaffed, operating under new COVID protocols, which make it even harder to do your job. Then if all you see is the worst cases of COVID, if that because your perception becomes your reality. If you're working in a hospital, that's you only see the cases that result in hospitalization. Your perception is going to be informed by that. You're gonna believe that this is how COVID manifests across all of society. So I have some empathy really with the NHS staff who have suffered some form of um, criticism and abuse from the public who are frustrated. I also empathise with the frustration amongst the public because the data has not been accurate. We've had some real clear proof points from freedom of information requests that the data hasn't been accurate. But I tried to see it through the staff's eyes because you know you don't get to see the mild cases that other people are having, or the asymptomatic cases if you're working flat out in a hospital dealing with patients. So when you see the doctors on Twitter and Facebook, talking about how severe some of the cases are, we don't. I don't dispute that they are at all. We
Mm.
know that there's some serious cases. We know it can really adversely affect people, but it's not a reflection of the entirety. And I think there's been some misnomers in there. There's been some issues around the kind of the NHS staffs being kind of almost complicit in their own demise in this regard. But I don't think that's a fair accusation.
Yeah, it's all everyone's got their personal journey in this. And so you do have people who did see a lot of severe COVID cases, but it's like you say, they were more likely the people working within the ICUs,
Mm, mm,
because they were the severe cases that went in. For me, as someone who was frontline, especially during the second wave, what I saw were very mild cases compared to the first wave.
mm,
But these people were so frightened for their lives, they just wanted someone to, just to reassure them that it was going to be all right. We had so much media coverage of COVID-19 and how deadly it was and how it was going to kill everyone. That people, when they caught it, they just got scared. And I
yes.
think the biggest problem is that we didn't have any preventative care for these people. They were basically told, you've got COVID, wait till day 7, day 10, see if you get better. And so
Mm,
you're
mm,
playing this waiting game where you're isolated from family
yeah.
or from work or whatever, and you're just sitting there thinking about, are you going to get worse? Is this normal?
Yes.
I went to an 18-year-old recently who had a cold and flu. She had both of her jabs. And I said, do you think it's COVID? And she said, no, I'd be dead by now. And I
You're
just
right.
thought, I just thought, no, like you're 18, you're a healthy 18. You have a bit of asthma, but I'm sure it's not that bad. But it's just that
Mm,
idea that people think that they are going to die with COVID. And in the
yes.
second wave, which was my most stressful period, it was dealing with people who had this insane idea that they were going to die.
Mm.
And I think it was just more frustrating that we couldn't give them anything to settle them. Um,
Yes.
it's the way I work is normally just to provide as much information as I can to these patients before they go to hospital so that they're comfortable in knowing what to expect. But
Yes.
with COVID, because of all the changes that happened, I'm trying to reassure them that there is nothing that they can do in hospital. There's nothing that they'll give. People in this day and age, they want something to fix them. And
Mm.
the unfortunate thing with COVID is there's not really anything to fix them. And it is a waiting game, but it's a good waiting game because well, I don't know the current stats. Is it 97%, 98% recovery? So there's pretty good stats.
Yeah, I think it's even higher than that actually. But it's I mean, it makes me remember of a couple of occasions. I remember in my early 20s, I'd been traveling and I came back and I'd been unwell when I came back from my travels. And after 2 weeks of being unwell, I remember going to a service station on the way to a meeting, and I basically hyperventilated and had kind of collapsed, and I was convinced I was having a heart attack in my mid-20s. But this is how your brain starts to play tricks on you. But
Yeah,
it's a very real experience. It was really really worrying.
yeah,
So, but because I was visibly ill, and had just been traveling in kind of developing parts of the world. So my colleague who was with me called an ambulance, and the ambulance came, and they as soon as they saw me, they just said, "You're hyperventilating. You're basically you had a panic attack."
yeah,
And the moment I had that reassurance, I felt a lot better. Now, it turned out that I'd had a severe form of salmonella and I was hospitalized. And they said, "I don't know how you've been working for the last 2 weeks. You're incredibly ill." Um,
wow.
but I tell that story because a friend of mine in his mid-30s had the same experience with COVID. He got COVID and panicked.
Yeah,
The same thing happened. The ambulance came out to see him. They just reassured him that he's okay. And the next day he pretty much recovered. It was because he built it up in his mind, this fear that he was going to die,
yeah,
um, which people have had. This is people have been bombarded with it. They either believe they're going to end up in the ICU or they're going to die, and that's down to the public health messaging in many ways, as well as the government and the media that have amplified this.
yeah.
Um, but the mind can play tricks on you when you're afraid, and that's been really sad to see with some people.
Yeah, there's high levels of anxiety, and I think it's really hard to break that down, especially if you've been bombarded since, March 2020. We've been hit all the time saying it's deadly, it's infectious, people have massive hospitalizations, all this stuff. So it's been difficult. I think now it's a bit more relaxed where people have kind of seen that, if they haven't had it by now, they're doing pretty well.
Mm,
And or they know people who've had COVID and it's been very mild and they've recovered
yes.
well. There's very few of us who know someone directly who has passed away from COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I just personally, I just feel that most of us are doing the right thing. We're doing, we're doing whatever we need to protect our vulnerable. Um,
Yes.
but it's in the end, it's your personal choice, and we know the consequences, and we're ready to deal with it.
Yes, I mean, there's two strands here I'd like to explore. So, firstly, you're absolutely right. Off the back of what we just talked about, this perception of COVID is almost all of these mandates and regulations that we've seen have come up off the back of this perception that's been created of the severity of the disease. And again, I'm not saying that people don't get severely ill or die, but I'm saying for the vast majority of people, the evidence suggests that the symptoms are either asymptomatic, mild at the worst, and I know that doesn't take away, for the families who have lost loved ones, you have to, I still have empathy for them. But the point is here, it's a lot of what we're seeing now is predicated on this idea that it's this deadly disease to all beings, which is just flawed. The data doesn't reflect that. But then the second piece here is around the kind of choice element when it comes to vaccines specifically. We've seen people who have chosen not to have the vaccine labeled. I mean, even to use the label unvaccinated has now got connotations.
Yeah.
It's just a binary status of you're either vaccinated or not. But the term unvaccinated is now loaded. People have been labelled anti-vaxxers or selfish for not having the vaccine,
Yeah.
which is flawed for so many reasons we've already talked about. But it's also predicated on the idea that people are infected until proven uninfected. That we're sick until proven healthy. Um,
Yeah, because I think in the NHS, I think the current data is 93% have had their first dose of any whatever vaccine they've chosen, and
yeah.
90% have been double dosed. So what we want to do with the NHS 100 is we want to highlight this 3%.
Yes.
Why have they had this single dose and why have they not had their second dose? Has there been some sort of reaction with them? Have they felt unwell? Because if you bring in these vaccine mandates and you require a double dose plus a booster, you're
Mm,
also going to lose these people who've just had the single shot. So there needs to be an acknowledgement of these people who have had their single shot and have not wanted to get their second. And
yes.
these mandates are not recognizing them at all.
No.
They're saying you just have to get it. We don't care about what happened with you because it's not recognized as an adverse reaction. So you just have to do it. So we are going to be losing more than 100,000 people in the NHS if we
What?
these mandates.
And those numbers, I presume, are based upon the prior numbers of the previous definition of fully vaccinated, which was double jabbed. Because the UK numbers, I think there was something like 80+% of the country had been double jabbed or close to that. But then overnight, when being fully vaccinated became to include the term booster, it dropped
Mhm.
to 23% of the country. So
Yeah.
if these mandates are predicated on the boosters as well as the first two jabs, then I'm sure that 100,000 number will increase significantly.
Yeah, definitely will because there are a lot of my colleagues who've had both their jabs who are unwilling to go on with their booster for
Mm,
whatever reason that they have with it. Some of them did become unwell. Admittedly, they're not like adverse reactions, but they were just unwell enough to not want to go through that again. The
mm.
whole purpose of these vaccines was to stop us from being unwell, but you're getting unwell getting them. It just kind of, I mean, if you took this vaccine and you had no reactions whatsoever, then yeah, sure, I'm sure many people would take these vaccines, but they're not. Like, people are presenting with 24 hours of bad headaches, 2 days of fevers, aches and pains after these jabs. It's not comfortable. Like,
Mm, mm.
we some of us took these vaccines to stop the symptoms of COVID, but in the end we're getting like an immune reaction to these vaccines, which is still uncomfortable. And some
Yes,
just don't want that every 6 months or three
yes,
months or however many jabs we need throughout the year.
yes, and that still doesn't then take into account the kind of rarer incidences of more severe instances, which we're seeing, in relative terms, record amounts of compared to prior vaccines, at least according to the UK yellow card system. But
Yeah.
which obviously plays a role in people's choice. But what I'd like to talk about briefly, because this number 100,000, I sadly think it will increase because of the kind of new mindset around the booster jabs. But
Yeah.
um, you spoke about the NHS was the challenges of working in the NHS during the pandemic. Could you just give us a little flavour of how challenging it's been for staff in the NHS, and then in that context, then explore what will the impact of these mandates be on the care of the level of service that the staff are able to provide if we lose this many staff?
Yeah, so to according to some figures, there's 93,000 vacancies at the moment in the NHS, which they're
Wow.
struggling to fill. One of my local hospitals, there's 6 staff down every shift. So that's your day shift and your night shift. And it's one of the busiest hospitals as well. During the pandemic, it's a bit funny because there was a time when we were extremely busy, and our problems were that we were locked. I mean, as an ambulance service anyway, we were busy for a short period before lockdown, and we
Mm,
were locked at hospitals with long waits for beds because the
mm,
problem was we were trying to find, I guess, isolation rooms while we tried to figure out what this virus was going to be. So
mm,
a lot of us were on the ambulances with our patients for a good 2, 3 hours while we waited for beds in the hospitals to open up.
mm,
But then lockdown happened and we were very quiet.
mm,
So
mm.
I went from 6 jobs a day down to 2 jobs a day during this massive pandemic. And
Wow.
this happened for a good, maybe 3 months.
Yes.
So, and I don't know how it was in the hospitals. I did hear that the intensive care units were very busy.
Mm.
COVID wards were a bit busy, but everywhere else, we a lot of staff experienced a lot of quiet time that we've never experienced before, and I think we've been spoilt with that. Really, it was a nice break. But even before COVID, we were experiencing pressures all the time because we are
Yes.
continually short staffed for some reason. Um, so it's not that the staffing crisis is a new thing from the pandemic. I think it has been worse after the pandemic because we were treated like nothing. We were just cannon fodder for the NHS. We were put at risk with minimal PPE. Our concerns that we raised were not listened to. It was basically just get out there and do it and do what you can. So it has resulted in some, early retirements, a lot of people leaving to go back home. Um, it has increased more pressures on the
Mm.
NHS. And I think
Mm.
when you bring in these mandates and you force the current staff to take up these mandates, it'll be our hill that we stand on, where we say, no, you didn't really respect us during a pandemic. I don't see why I need to take this vaccine that I don't want to take for whatever reason. I'll leave. So you will be losing a lot more staff over these mandates where you can work around, and we have worked around during the pandemic with infection protocols or protective personal equipment. We've managed to keep ourselves safe without a vaccine.
Yes.
So it's just we're chronically understaffed, and this is going to increase those staffing pressures. And to say that it's protecting the NHS and protecting the public, it's a lie.
Well, it's the opposite.
Yeah,
Because the impact on the staff, you have to empathise with the care workers and the staff that are put under these pressures by virtue of this situation. But also, ultimately, what that is, what the end result of that is diminished patient care.
yeah,
We're already seeing it in the care homes. The care homes are overstretched. The waiting lists are unbelievable. The waiting lists within the waiting lists within the NHS are at record levels now. So this is really going to take its toll, I believe, if
it
these
will.
things come to bear.
Yeah, definitely. I think there's a 5-year waiting list for elective surgeries now. And if you see staff leaving, how far will that extend to? Seeing specialists has long delays. Being seen in the A&E has massive delays. It will just put more pressure on the NHS, and people won't have their health be seen to, and it will cause more public health problems. And that's the truth of it.
Absolutely. Now, in terms of the unions, the GMB or Unison, the various different unions that represent or unite the various unions that represent NHS workers, have they been supportive of the NHS 100K campaign? Are they looking to protect your jobs?
So we've had wishy-washy answers. We've had replies from Unison that have not been positive for us. Um,
Right.
they've changed their stance once Sajid Javid announced mandates, and then they switched their ideology.
Mm.
So I'm not very positive with them. But most of the unions, they're just playing safe at the moment. They're waiting for legislation to occur before any movement occurs on their behalf. So we're currently petitioning the unions to stand for us. So whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated, we want all NHS staff to petition their unions against this mandate, because I think the current obsession is a pay rise for understaffed and overstretched NHS workers, but there's no point in a pay rise when we don't have a job. So I really want to have NHS staff push for keeping our jobs. Um, so if we can petition the unions, that would be great. We do have
Mm.
a few templates on our website, but our biggest aim is to stop legislation from occurring.
Yes.
So I think there was the House of Lords just came out with a reply for the proposed legislations, and it was quite damning for the government. So we're going to try and see what we can do with the House of Lords to delay or at least prevent these mandates coming in.
Fantastic. And one of the experiences I've seen with the broader sectors here is I've got several friends and people within this kind of movement that's emerged that have been vaccinated, but they've fully stand against mandates.
Yeah.
They respect people's right to choose. Are you seeing the same within the NHS? Are you seeing your
Yes.
colleagues who have been fully vaccinated are supporting
Yeah.
this movement? Yeah.
Definitely, like we there. I think there is a large support of people who chose to take the vaccine, but who do respect the rights to choose. And I
Mm,
think that's the biggest, like that's the core issue of this whole thing. That as health professionals, we are meant to respect the individual choice. So I think there is more support within our vaccinated colleagues against these mandates. So it's just trying to unite both camps because there has been that segregation occurring between unvaccinated and vaccinated staff or members of the public. And that needs to stop. Like we are one unit, and in the end, it is just a respect of your individual right to choose. Um, yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you for that. Now, before we move on to talk about how the campaign is going to work and how the public can support, would just like to touch upon this thing that I opened up with about the hypocrisy of the policy.
Yeah.
It seemed like the government moved the date, being quite clearly aware that if they lose 100,000 plus staff before winter, it would have a devastating impact on care. So moving it to potentially spring, April time next year. What are your thoughts on that particular political move?
I did a speech at Parliament Square about this, basically just saying that we're good enough for winter pressures until we're April Fools. I think
Mm,
it's disheartening that if you're going under the premise that unvaccinated colleagues are a danger to public, you need to get rid of us now. It's not okay to keep us to prop you up during winter pressures and then just get rid of us on April Fools.
yes,
We're either a danger now or we're never a danger, and that's just what I want to put forward. So
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that's such a. I mean, it's such an important point. Again, it just goes to the point how ideologically this is an ideology rather than something based on evidence or fact. Because
yeah,
you're absolutely right. If they believed that the unvaccinated workers were a risk, the winter would be the greatest
yeah,
peak of that risk. But quite clearly, they've made other assessments. So very very, I like that point. April Fools, but we need to make sure that you don't become April Fools
yes.
here. So tell us a little bit about the campaign and how the public can get. Firstly, what are your plans next? How are you driving this forward, and then how can the public get involved?
So we're just trying to find any NHS workers who are against vaccine mandates because it is a lonely road that we're walking, and I think with the NHS and how it is, it's very difficult to speak up against these mandates. So we want to make sure that those people who feel like it's difficult to talk, you're not
Mm,
alone.
mm,
So try and reach out and have a chat to people about this and get them to join NHS 100K. So we're running a few campaigns for NHS staff and the public. Our first one is to send an MP letter to stop legislation from occurring. So what we want to focus on is that bringing in these vaccine mandates, they will not protect the public because you will lose 100,000 staff, and that will push the NHS to its knees, being
mm,
chronically understaffed. So we want to highlight that fact. It's not about COVID or the vaccines. It's about a staffing issue and propping up the NHS. You can't afford to lose any more staff at this point in time. So that's our public and NHS workers campaign as well for MPs. We're campaigning for unions to start creating some sort of actions so that if mandates do come in, then we can have union backing to do certain things like protesting or striking, or I don't know what they want to do, something that will be effective against mandates. And also for NHS workers and members of the public as well to remove your health records from the databases, because at the moment we are being discriminated against according to our health choices. And when that happens, your health data needs to be removed because if it's going to be used against you, no one should ever know about your health status. So all of these templates can be found on nhs100k.com. We have an actions list of things to do. So hopefully we can get some momentum happening with that, stop legislation from coming in, and then just banding together to continue our petition to stop it from coming in.
fantastic, excellent work. I mean, when I first heard of the mandates, I did wonder whether if you could get support. I mean, the challenge is the unions have been complicit in many of these mandates. A lot of the government policy has been supported by unions, which is certainly the upper levels of management. I know plenty of people that have had contact with lower middle management within the unions who are supportive of these kind of aims. But
Mm.
um, it's been quite devastating to see the unions absent in supporting workers' rights throughout this period. And
Yeah.
I think if you can get the unions on board, that'd be a huge plus. But
Yeah.
I did wonder, if you were to collaborate with your colleagues who, including those who have been vaccinated, to stage a walkout, or even the act of threatening a walkout en masse. The NHS this winter, couldn't, obviously the patient care couldn't be delivered with if there's a mass walkout. Would you consider that type of action, strikes, walkouts?
Yeah, we would consider some form of protest similar.
Mm,
But we want to make sure it's done at the right time. So if legislation does occur, we are planning something for everyone involved.
mm.
Um, but we just can't say much about it.
No, that's okay. Yeah,
But
I
yeah,
mean,
there are plans in place if legislation occurs. But what we want is we want to stop legislation from occurring in the first place, because once that's in, our position is harder to fight. So
absolutely.
if we can get members of the public to write into their MP and just say, we don't care about your vaccination status, we just want a working NHS. Like, that's what we want. And these mandates will not allow a working NHS to occur.
Absolutely. I think that's absolutely right approach, and thoroughly support you on that, and encourage everyone at home today. Please do make sure you go to nhs100k.com, have a look at all the information on the site there. You can see all the photos that we had on the screen earlier on. You can go to the action section and take action yourself. Please do support this campaign. This is so important. The NHS has been politicised throughout this campaign, and this is no way to reward those staff who have been here tirelessly working to support the health outcomes of all patients of all uh, illnesses and diseases, etc., and conditions. So it's massively important that we pull together to support you. And I empathise with the position, because the people I know that work in the NHS, they do so because they want to go and care for patients. It's their passion. That looking after, supporting others and caring for others is their passion. So they don't want to walk out. They don't want to strike because, on one hand, they feel passionate about standing up for the cause, but on the other hand, they feel stuck because they don't want to let down their patients. And that's an awful predicament that the government's put
Yeah.
you in. So I really hope you can be successful, and anything we can do to support, we will
Yeah.
do.
Thank you. Yeah. We just want to continue advocating for our patients, because there has been discrimination occurring, and we just want to still continue to be a voice for everyone, for regardless of their choices. With the whole vaccinated, unvaccinated argument, we still treat people, whether you're unvaccinated or not, and we treat them equally. It's just we want to continue doing that, and especially for those of us who are unvaccinated, we do want to advocate for people who are also unvaccinated and support them in their choice without them being forced to feel like they're aliens, or just forced to feel like they're alone, because it's a choice in the end. And it's a choice that you make, and you have to be comfortable with it, but you shouldn't be made to feel any different. I think that's the thing.
No, absolutely. And finally, is there another way that, obviously all the information is on the website, but in terms of social media, they can obviously look out for this hill on the hashtag. Is there
Yeah.
other ways people can keep in touch with the campaign? Is there a Twitter account or a Telegram that people can follow?
Yeah, so we've got Twitter, we've got Telegram, we've got Instagram, and we've just started a Facebook page. So it's all those links with NHS 100K at the end.
Brilliant.
So we're on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Telegram.
Fantastic.
Yeah, so you can follow us on those.
Brilliant. Now, please do make sure you tap into that campaign. This is a vital importance, and it's
Yeah.
that with countries around the world now extending those mandates into other sectors or even society wide. If we can help create a victory here for the NHS, then we may form a barrier against wider societal mandates across the UK. So this
Yeah.
this this campaign could be one of the most important campaigns that can be supported right now. Lilith, I just want to say just a huge amount of respect for what you're doing. I'm so delighted every time I meet someone who's passionately standing up against this type of regulation. I'm just deeply inspired. So,
Thank you.
keep up the strong work. And like I said, anything that myself and my audience can do,
Yeah.
our team, we're here to support you. So my call to action to the audience watching this now is, please, firstly, share this broadcast. Let's help raise awareness of this conversation and what's happening within the NHS and the impact it's going to have on public health, which is ultimately what this is about. Secondly, please do visit nhs100.com. Go and look at the actions you can take and find out about the campaign. And ultimately, if you know people that work in the NHS, please make sure they're aware of this, because they need your support right now. Colleagues need to stand in unity together to help this campaign fly. So please play your part. We all have a role to play in warding off these discriminatory mandates, and together we can help protect the NHS. The government's mantra for the last 2 years has been about protecting the NHS. Yet here they are once again slashing away at it. So it's down to us. It's down to us to uphold the values of the healthcare system.
Yes, definitely. Thank you. Thank you very much for having me on. So.
My pleasure. Thank you so much. Let's keep us informed about what's next. And if there's any actions coming up that we can support, we'll get it distributed. So thank you so much for being here. And for those of you watching at home, if you haven't done so already, my final call to action today is to subscribe to the Pandemic Podcast. Simply go to danjgregory.com/pandemic. We are in the midst of launching a brand new community to bring our audience together so that we can help drive campaigns like this, but also start to look with one eye to the future about the future we can build off the back of the catastrophes we've witnessed over the last 2 years. So please join our mailing list to be first in line to hear about what we have planned. We're also sharing plenty of details about other campaigns that are coming up and different ways you can take action. So it's a vital place for you to join. And lastly, make sure you join our Telegram account as well. You can just search for Pandemic Podcast UK on Telegram and join our community there. So thank you again to Lilith. Thank you to our audience for watching this live or in recordings. It's an honor to support this campaign, the NHS 100 campaign, 100,000 campaign, and best of luck. And thank you all. Good night for now.
Thank you.